We need to think big. If I had my way to talk to the governors that just came in recently, well, I would have only one theme for them. Think big. We need to move away from this level of mediocrity because the world is moving on, as we know.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, okay, the question of growth, currently 2.5 over 2%, right? But Tokwe has talked about it getting to 10%. In targeting that kind of growth, there has to be a change of processes. CBN needs to stay within the monetary area. The government needs to handle the fiscal and handle it as it should well. So how do we move forward? Let's begin to look at solutions now. What do we do to get, if we're going to be targeting a 10% growth compared to the other countries around us? Well,
the challenge really now is that the human capital, when you look at the rate of unemployment, now we have about 23%. There's a projection that in 2020 is likely to be about 33% unemployment. Then when you look at youth unemployment, that's over 60%. That's where the challenge is. How can we unleash the youth? You know, how can we engage them in such a way, you know, that they can now begin to own their own businesses? They can be empowered, because it's like a time bomb waiting to explode.
Are you sure they don't own their businesses?
No, a lot of youths, I mean, when you look at it, I mean, about 20 million youths are there, just languishing, without anything to really do. And for example, I've been an entrepreneur for about 17 years. I used to work in the banking industry. And I've had the opportunity to engage the youth, you know, I mean, to try and lift them up. But if we can have, in terms of, you know, a focus on SMEs, you know, I know the government, you know, Lagos State, even the federal government has been trying to put in policies, but in this second term of the Buhari administration, a lot of focus has to be on the youth. I know recently the U.S. government partnered with the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, gave them, you know, a fund of about $10 million, you know, but more needs to be done for the youth, because they are the engine room, you know, of any robust economy. What we're seeing is that, you know, there's been a lot of spending on infrastructure, but when you also look at the educational sector, in terms of the budgetary allocation for the educational sector, and that's where innovation and research comes, you know, we need to also empower the educational sector. And when you empower the educational sector, the spirit of entrepreneurship is encouraged. Yeah, it kicks in. And so when you talk about growth, if you look at the way the U.S. economy is, there's more of SMEs, okay, the Walmarts, and, you know, so. Let me bring
in Dr. Apollo, that thing of employment, human capital development, he's talked about 20 million youths who don't really, but I was having a conversation with someone recently, and he said something to me. He actually sent me a document, and I'm still going through the document. He said that all these people we say are unemployed, they have, in quotes, runs as a small businesses, informal businesses, and some of them make as much as 20,000 a day from informal business, legal informal businesses that they cannot have documents to say this is what I earn, but maybe I come to your house, I wash your car, I mean, you give me 10,000 or 20,000 or even 5,000 today. I go to another house, I do the same thing, and they make this kind of monies without any formal records of these monies that are made. Yet we still believe that they are unemployed. Is there a way to look at the informal market and find a way of tying it up with the formal side to ease the employment situation we find ourselves?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. But let me try to shock you a bit. The youths are not unemployed. In a very rhetoric manner and satirical manner, unfortunately, they are employed with the social media. The youths are confined to the social media, tweeting, likes, that's what they do.
But that's not employment.
Look, I'm coming. That's why I say it's satirical, you know, so that's not the type of employment we are talking about. Now, in terms of employment, I like to differ a little bit by saying that to grow an economy, you know, up to the level of 10%, it seems to be like a mirage. Why do I say so? If you want to construct a house like this, you need pillars. What are the pillars that we have in this country to grow and build this economy? And I've been doing research for the past 5 years. And one of the key pillars is that of security. It's that of security. You cannot have insecurity and be talking about growth. Look at the agricultural sector that we are financing. Many farmers can no longer go to their farms. You are pumping money into agriculture, fine. But where is the security? The borders are simply porous. And if we continue the way we are, in the next 5 years, we may become a failed state.
What happens when you say the issue of borders being porous, that we have the trade treaties with ECOWAS countries and all of that, and we are a signatory to this treaty. So what are you saying?
What I'm saying is this.
Because at the end of the day, some people use that as an excuse for people moving back and forth.
What's Donald Trump doing in America? They have all the technology, they have the resources. But they are he's strongly saying that they need to build borders. If you check the borders of Nigeria, thousands and thousands and thousands, people just pouring in, arms just keep on pouring in. And then we keep on fighting and fighting and fighting.
Okay, it looks like anytime you're talking, we tend to go on break. I'll come back to you. Please don't go. Don't lose your train of thought. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back to Sunrise. We're still talking about rethinking the economy, and we are getting towards the closing moment. So you were talking about the issue of security and the borders, how that will help to rejig our economy.
Yes.
How do we?
Yes, there's studies have been carried out globally that shows that there's a positive correlation between the level of security in a nation and the growth trajectory of those countries. So the point I'm making is this: if we do not get the security side right, as we see now, we don't know who is in Nigeria. We don't know. People are just pouring in. When things were good globally, your neighbors will be watching you eating chicken, fried rice, and so on. Now that everywhere is facing challenges, and your borders are just open, keep coming in. And then, of course, arms keep pouring in. Okay? In the midst of, look at the whole of the Northeast, even the state of the president himself. It's a disaster. You go to farms, you are attacked. My friend, who is an investor, he said, go into farming. Right now, he cannot go into those farms all over the country. And now, even industries, companies in the Northeast, they are affected. Many employees have been killed and so on. In the spate of this insecurity, how are we going to be interrogating ourselves and discussing the issue of growth?
So that we'll manage our time. So one of the pillars you're talking about is security.
Security.
He talked about human capital.
Yeah.
So let's come back to...
Let me ask him this question, Mr. Ebo. We're talking about growing the economy, and we have been told from elementary economics that the economy is actually run by SMEs. How many big companies can you really have? If young people can set up their own little companies, you set up yours, I set up mine, we'll employ 5 people, 10 people. We're growing employment, the economy is growing. But SMEs cannot even start up. So where does that leave us?
Yes, you need to look at, when you're talking about the SMEs, you look at what are those factors that have been limiting their growth. One, infrastructure is key. They need to think about getting their power, even access, distributing your products, because if you don't have access road, nobody would patronize you, or you can't even distribute your products. It's key. There's also what we also call integrity deficits. In terms of, if you even advance loan to a lot of the SMEs, are they repaying some of these loans? There's been a lot of government initiatives, the You Win programs, the Lagos State Fund is also there. But have they been, in terms of the structure, have they been able to repay such that they can also lend the repaid funds to order to expand that particular space? Well, it's really critical, because when you dissect the SME space, it accounts for over 50% for employment. And
right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And the major challenge that most of them have, based on studies, is finance. Some of them, as little as 100,000 naira, would be sufficient for them to grow their business.
Really grow? Because one of the, let me tie this into, when
Yeah.
you talked about the pillars. I know that one of the pillars of a growing economy is power.
Yeah.
So you said some of them need 100,000. Of that 100,000, you realize some of them spend as much as 40 to 50% on power alone.
Yes, it's critical. It's and that is why I spoke about in terms of infrastructure. So for government, for us to move on, government can't do this alone. Look at the budget, 8.3 trillion naira. Out of that, maybe about 5 or 6 trillion naira would be for recurrent expenditure and just less than about 2 trillion for capital expenditure. We need to see how we want to collaborate more with the private investors, both foreign and domestic investors, and why we should be concerned why we've not been seeing a lot of attraction from the investors. Enforcement of contract is key. We can look at a lot of the public-private partnership arrangements in the past. Most of them have not been very successful. So a lot of agreements that have been signed does not outlive those that signed those agreements with the partners. The refineries, we are looking for people, foreign investors, whether domestic or foreign investors, that would help run some of those moribund refineries. But you can sign a contract today and a new government or a new minister comes and that contract is cancelled. So we need to respect contract, enforce, provide confidence that once this contract is signed, even if you have to make it more rigorous before it's signed, and once it's signed, you are rest assured that they would abide by the contract. Even you look at the power sector, the banks were the major supporter or that backed in terms of funding the power sector privatization in 2013. Most of them now, it was based on a projected cash flow that they will be getting based on, there's this MITO that looks at in terms of the pricing, the exchange rate, the inflation rate, growth rate. But now, it's like we're subsidizing power. We're not, the cost-reflective tariff is not operational. We know the metering system, yes, it's a major problem. But before they lent or advanced loan to some of this sector, the cash flow was what they saw, projection. But now, the government is not keeping to that. So if you look at past projects, so if government, like we are talking about the PIB bill, if it's passed, the governance part that will encourage investment, will the banks be willing to increase their lending to that space based on just what government or even just a policy? So we need to provide confidence to attract investments so that we can, because the funding, we can't do this, the government can't do this alone. If we continue to borrow to fund Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, to do the rail system, we won't be able to sustain
so
that. The private investment needs to be attracted for us to grow at that kind of growth rate that we're anticipating.
Mr. Faswa, the 10% target you've suggested in terms of growth rate, there are those who are concerned. Festus Akimboye tweeted and listed out some countries whose growth rate is at about 1.2, 2.1, Nigeria and the US about a little over 2%, Nigeria is about 2.1%. Some other countries, I think India or China or thereabout, has 1.8%. Now, that is his own tweet. That's what he's thinking. But what has been said is a question of the infrastructure and pillars. The panelists here have raised 3 pillars. Let me see if I got them right. Human capital development, security. He's talked about finance, vis-a-vis power. At the end of the day, would these 3 pillars taken care of, would they help in any way? Do we need to rethink how we handle those 3 pillars to even move forward?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, that Twitter, I'll ask them to go and do their research well. China is at 6%, 6.5%. India is about 8 to 8.5%. And Nigeria is actually perhaps the slowest growing economy in Africa. And of course, South Africa, I believe that South African economy is bigger than ours. Of course, in terms of economic complexity, South African economy is bigger than ours. If you just Google South Africa's budget for 2019, what you see there, they've approved their budget for the next 3 years, is 5.8 trillion rand. when I did the conversion, it came to about $135 billion every year. The budget for education in South Africa alone is about $10 billion every year, all right, which is bigger than Nigeria's entire budget for everything. But that said, what I want us to do for Nigeria's economy to move forward is we've got to have a fairly long-term approach. And also, we have to
put it out so that you also, in the course of your conversation, you can put it all straight. I heard India is 7.3%, China is 6.3%, Indonesia is 5.2%, US is 2.3%, Brazil is 2.1%, Nigeria is 2.1%, Saudi Arabia is 1.8%, Canada is 1.5%, France is 1.3%, UK is 1.2%, South Africa is 1.2%, and Germany's growth rate is 0.8%. Just to tie that in so that you can carry on with your conversation. So, Dr.
Yeah, so essentially, it's very important not to compare our economy with economies that are plateaued. You see, when I ran for president, I did a lot of research in this area. If you Google U.S. GDP growth rate, historical, and you went as far back as 1940s, you find that somewhere in the 1950s, 60s, the U.S. economy grew at 12% in some years. And I think that we should situate ourselves at that level, not to begin to compare them ourselves to where they are today. These are economies that have achieved and plateaued. We're talking about $13 trillion economies. But if China's economy at $12 trillion could still be growing at 6.3%, all right, then we know we have a challenge. So we need to have a vision for ourselves. And then we need to be able to challenge ourselves to say, this is where we want to go. This is what we want to achieve. Again, we can see avenues for growth in this economy which we are not exploring. I talked about tourism earlier on. Okay, even simple things like excise duty. You know that Nigeria is where you find the cheapest cigarettes and alcohol, perhaps in the world. And the other time they wanted to put a bit of excise duty on it, we started to resist. So we have to ask ourselves, both the leaders and the led, where exactly are we going as a people? You know, so in terms of all of these things like security, you know, SMEs, we're doing a lot on SMEs already. I must tell you, Nigerians are some of the most entrepreneurial people. However, there's a huge chunk of youth in all our villages. For those who haven't been in politics, they may not know. When I traveled around this country, that was what I saw. People that were totally disconnected from what was going on. They were totally disconnected from governance in this country. And those are the people we need to bring on board. For example, you started your program before you cut on to this session. You were talking about energy, for example. People talk about energy and all of that. You know, but one thing that's very, very interesting, which we must begin to work on, is that the ministry is working on uninterrupted electricity for 7 universities and 2 teaching hospitals. But in all of those universities, there's no involvement of the students or the lecturers, people in electrical engineering. They have no input. So we say that, oh, we're going to bring you know, the equipment from abroad, put them in the pot, install them. Then 3 years after they're coughing, we have to go back abroad to bring the people that will repair them. And that was what happened with our refineries. You know, the Italian companies that installed them, they tell you today that, look, we're not doing that anymore. You know, and so we're stuck with them. So until we understand that, look, we have a vision for ourselves, and we understand that we are the ones that will fix our economy. Whether the security, I'm in the era, I'm in the realm of preferring solutions. You understand? If you want to solve security of this country, employ more people in the security sector. We need more people in intelligence gathering. We need more policemen. We need more boots on ground. We pay them the money. You know, but you have to fix the issue of ghost workers. There's more than 80,000 ghost policemen. There's more than 50,000 ghost army men in this country. You know, so you see, elite consensus. And I was saying to some people yesterday, including Barrister Emefiele, we were in one forum, that look, we've got to the point where we may need to actually begin to wring some concessions from our elite. Now that they are fighting themselves, the man in Kano is appointing 3 new emirs and all of that. You know, our big men can no longer go between Abuja and Kaduna. Everybody will queue at the train station now. This is a good time for us to move and tell the elites that, listen, do you think it's bad enough? 13.2 million children on the streets. You know, 91 million people in extreme poverty, 23% of unemployment. This is the time for you to concede, to ensure that we provide what they call public good for our people, education, health, security. And it is the youth of this country that need to be employed in those sectors, first and foremost. It is only after that is done that SMEs will thrive. For now, we're actually having a lot of SMEs, but those guys can't sell. Nobody's, the purchasing power to buy from them is a problem. And I want to say one thing that which Ayode Jiebo from AfriInvest mentioned, very, very important, that a lot of these interventions that we're creating, and we seem to be creating a bank for every problem. We need to ensure that those banks are not losing money. We've got 6 trillion naira lying at AMCON, and Nigeria's credit culture is not very developed. So we see a scenario where a lot of people collect a lot of money from banks and simply don't bother to pay back. They believe that it's their own national cake. We need to get to that level. Of course, some of the credit bureau agencies are working on that now. They need to be empowered more so that we can have credit ratings even for companies, and banks must ensure that they follow those credit ratings. You don't give more money to someone who has messed up their credit rating in this country. So it's a cornucopia of ideas and all of that we need to talk about here. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me, Dr. Apollo, you mentioned the youth on social media earlier. I want to bring you back to that and ask you how, since they spend a lot of time on social media, a lot of money can be made through the internet.
Indeed, some are making it.
Some are making
legally.
it, yes. Is there a way that we can make that sum a bit wider, so that more of them can actually make use of this social media in a way that will actually bring them funds to look after themselves, so that they are actually self-employed, if you will, working on social media?
Yes, that's a very good point. For us to have optimal utilization of the youth in terms of social media deployment, you will need the right strategies. You will need to build the right strategies to do this. And that takes me to the economic plan of the country. If we read the economic plan of the country, all of these things are contained there. All these discussions we're getting from Abuja, so many points and so, they are all in the economy. Nigeria has an economic plan, well written and documented. Okay? So there's a section there that deals with the deployment.
Is that the ARGP?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a section that deals with technology deployment and how to optimize our youths. And I think we need to go to that document. We have several pages of economic plan.
So the question of implementation.
It's implementation.
We have had
you see,
14 economic plans since 1972.
Economic plan. Planning itself is just 20%. It's execution. So we should be interrogating and asking questions. What is happening to this plan? All of these points we are raising here, they are there in the economic plan. And so we need to begin to interrogate and engage government and to drive home the point that they have to be assessed on the basis of implementation of this plan. They are all there.
So
the second point, my friend from Abuja was saying, employ more soldiers, employ more police. You can employ the whole of Nigerians to be fighting. You see, the best approach is to prevent, create employment, build the walls on our borders, prevent people from just flying into this country and flying out. That is what is happening. So it is not a question of changing security chiefs. You can change security chiefs over and over again. As long as your borders people are just pouring, they're just pouring in. Okay, take Nigerians, for instance. They take all the risk crossing Atlantic oceans. More than 60% die inside that Atlantic Ocean to get to foreign countries in Libya. When they get to Libya, there are wars there to prevent them from entry, yet they enter. They can compare that to your own country, where the borders are just coming.
It's amazing that our borders are so porous, because I know how rigorous it is to get a Nigerian visa.
Yes.
To get a visa to enter this country is not an easy task at all. So, now, we've got to start winding down. So, your last word, one sentence only, in closing.
Yes, I think we need to accelerate implementation, like Doctor said.
Of the economic plan?
Of the economic plan. A lot of plans are on ground, but let's accelerate and let's have that political will to implement a lot of these plans, no matter who in may hurt.
Mr. Fashua,
Yes.
Your parting shot.
I think the economic plan needs to be rejigged. I think the plans are too mediocre. I think the targets are too low. I think we can do a whole lot better than we're doing. I don't want us to live in our own comfort zone. We need to get out of that comfort zone and think outside the box. That's what we need to be doing. The economic plan is just, the way, if you read it, it sounds like another budgeting. You know what I'm saying? We're not supposed to be talking of budgeting. We're talking about visioning now, about where do we want to take our country. And I believe that we have everything it takes. We're not talking about the things in the ground. We're talking the thing between our 2 ears. We've got the people in this country. We have Nigerians achieving great things abroad. You know, all the money we want to make in the world is right here. We have to, the only thing we need to understand now
Thank
is
you,
that
Mr. Fashua. Thank you very much. Dr. Abolo, one sentence, please.
Yes, my sentence is to talk directly to Mr. President, that one legacy that he can leave behind is to ensure security, safety of lives and property. And this can be done by dealing with the issue of the porous border. Build the walls.
Mr. Masala.
Finally, I would like to just say that the area of youth unemployment, SMEs should be given a lot of attention in the next 4 years.
Thank you very much.
We also need to celebrate the youth who are doing good.
Thank you very much.
Celebrate the youth.
I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Adegoke Omotola, who's CEO, First Degree Consultant, Dr. Emmanuel Abolo, Director General, Economic Think Tank Center, Mr. Ayodeji Ebo, MD, Afrinvest Securities, as well as Mr. Tokwe Fashua, an economist who joined us from our studio in Abuja. Thank you all very much, gentlemen, for coming to share your insights with us this morning. Sunrise will return in just a moment with another interesting conversation. Do join